Right now, there appears to be a real cultural shift happening in this country. For instance, the parent company of Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch, they've lost about $27 billion in market cap since the whole Dylan Mulvaney fiasco. And Bud Light as a brand has just completely nosedived in terms of favorability ratings. Then there's Target, which has lost about $15 billion in market value ever since they decided to place those quote-unquote tuck-friendly swimsuits out for children ahead of Pride Month. Then you have Disney, which has lost about $900 million on their last 8 movie releases, likely because the values presented in those movies no longer appeal to mainstream Americans. And then, most recently, we have the case of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, whose parent company has now lost almost $2 billion of market cap since July 4th. Why July 4th? Well, you see, last week, on July 4th, while most of us were celebrating America's independence with our families and our friends, well, the marketing team over at Ben & Jerry's were not celebrating anything. That's because instead of posting something normal about July 4th, well, here's what the official Ben & Jerry's Twitter account decided to post instead. Quote, "You should all smash those like and subscribe buttons for the YouTube algorithm." Now, I am of course just joking about that. I suspect that the marketing team over at Ben & Jerry's do not want you smashing those buttons. But they can't tell you what to do. And so if you'd like this information to reach ever more people, well, please do consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons so that this video can be picked up by the YouTube algorithm and shared out to ever more people. Now, here is what the official Ben & Jerry's Twitter account actually wrote on July 4th. Quote, "This 4th of July, it's high time we recognize that the U.S. exists on stolen indigenous land and commit to returning it. Learn more and take action now." And then right below that is a graphic which reads this, quote, "The United States was founded on stolen indigenous land. This 4th of July, let's commit to returning it." That is quite a message on America's Independence Day. However, I know what you must be thinking right now. Roman, whoever's running their Twitter account probably just went rogue. Surely, this cannot represent the viewpoint of a billion-dollar publicly traded American company. But that is where you would actually be wrong, evidenced by the fact that if you actually click on the link that was included in that tweet, you're taken to an entire page on the official Ben & Jerry's website, which explains why, according to them, the land underneath Mount Rushmore should be handed back to the Native Americans ASAP. And it's worth mentioning that Ben & Jerry's have thrown their hats into different political issues many times over the last several years. For instance, back in 2017, they stopped serving 2 scoops of the same flavored ice cream over in Australia in order to protest the Australian government's opposition to legalizing same-sex marriage. Then in 2018, they supported thousands of Afghan migrants flooding into Sweden. Later in 2018, they launched a new ice cream flavor called Pecan Resist in order to show their opposition to President Trump. And then in 2021, they stopped selling ice cream in Israel's West Bank in order to supposedly support the Palestinians. And so this July 4th tweet is just the latest in a long line of political activity that was coming from this particular brand. However, this time it's different because amidst the backdrop of these boycotts, like the ones against Bud Light, Target, and Disney, well, it appears that the culture of America has actually shifted. And along that line, calls for boycotting Ben & Jerry's have flooded the internet. And just like the other calls for boycotts, this one, well, it appears to be heavily pushed by conservative mothers, which is a trend that we're actually seeing more and more of. For instance, it was the conservative mothers who pushed the boycott against Target after their Pride Month displays were targeting children. Mothers have also been the ones choosing not to take their kids to see the latest Disney movies because the agendas in those films are not in line with the values held by those families. And now, it appears that conservative mothers are once again pushing this type of a campaign against Ben & Jerry's by either boycotting buying their ice cream and or refusing to take their kids to Ben & Jerry's physical locations. And on top of that, you had several large newspapers, like for instance the New York Post and the Washington Examiner, put out explicit calls for massive boycotts as well. But this is where things, you can say, get a little bit interesting. Because whereas before, in previous years, these conservative calls for boycotts were largely ignored. But that's not the case anymore, evidenced by the fact that the stock price of Unilever, which is the parent company of Ben & Jerry's, tanked. In less than a week, they've lost nearly $2 billion in market cap, with a lot more room to go down. But losing $2 billion was not the only bad news from Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield, the founders of Ben & Jerry. Because if you think about it for a moment, if you think back to their July 4th tweet about how America was founded on stolen land and about how it's high time to return that land, Well then, if you think about it, you might come to a sudden realization. Ben & Jerry's is a billion-dollar company. They have over 200 locations across the US. They have 2 giant ice cream factories, as well as a massive corporate headquarters over in Vermont. And so logically, if they really meant what they said, that it's high time to return American land to the natives, well, they themselves happen to own a considerable amount of land that they themselves could return right away. In fact, if you follow their logic and trace it back to the 17th century, you'll find that the land underneath Ben & Jerry's current headquarters was at one time inhabited by the Cossack Abenaki Nation. At one time, the Abenaki territory stretched all the way from Massachusetts over to Quebec. And right there in the middle is the location which currently happens to be the Ben & Jerry's headquarter campus. And wouldn't you believe it? Soon after their July 4th tweet, one of the current tribal chiefs of this Native American nation, well, he came out and he said that he would be quite interested in taking that land back. Here's specifically what Mr. Don Stevens, who is the current chief of the Nulhagan Band of the Cossack Abenaki Nation, here's what he said in an interview with Newsweek magazine. Quote, "We are always interested in reclaiming the stewardship of our lands throughout our traditional territories and providing opportunities to uplift our communities. The tribe has not been approached in regards to any land back opportunities from Ben & Jerry's. If and when we are approached, many conversations and discussions will need to take place to determine the best path forward for all involved." And along that line, the Abenaki Nation are scheduled to have a meeting today over in Quebec in order to discuss exactly this, the reclamation of their ancestral land. And yet, here's the funny thing. Even with this perfect opportunity before them, no one over at Ben & Jerry's has yet issued a public response about whether or not they'll be returning this land. We here at the Epoch Times, of course, reached out to them for comment, but have yet to hear back. And perhaps the reason that we have yet to hear back is because Mr. Ben Cohen has been a bit busy getting arrested in front of the Department of Justice over in Washington, D.C. You see, just yesterday, during a protest in support of Julian Assange, Ben Cohen, as well as several other left-wing protesters, they blocked the entrance of the Justice Department building and they were burning some props in effigy, making the point that the freedom of press was under attack. Ben Cohen was then subsequently arrested, but released a few hours later, meaning in practical terms that he has had now a full 24 hours to get back to the Indian chief about whether or not to return the land. But as of right now, nothing has yet been announced. And so that is currently the situation that's playing itself out in regards to Ben & Jerry's, which, if you take a step back and look at the full tapestry, it appears to really be part of a larger trend of these conservative boycotts that are really having an effect by hurting the bottom line of corporations. And these companies, they really take things seriously only when it affects the money. Or rather, I should say that this is fake money being printed into oblivion by those geniuses over in Washington, D.C. And so before they completely obliterate your life savings, what I recommend you do is to convert that fake money into real money, which is physical gold and silver. And the best company to use is the sponsor of today's episode, American Hartford Gold, who also happens to be my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, American Hartford Gold is one of the best companies in the game. Besides myself, they have thousands of other 5-star ratings across the country. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They ship quickly, directly to your doorstep. Their product listings are awesome. They're stacked with great options of gold and silver bullion and coins. And best of all, they have amazing customer service. When you pick up the phone and call them, you feel good because not only do they have friendly staff, but they're a patriotic company that actually sponsors a program like ours, so you feel good knowing you support a company that supports the truth getting out into the wider American audience. And so calling them up is a no-brainer. But best of all, if you tell them that Roman sent you, they will throw in up to $5,000 worth of free silver with your first purchase. So giving them a call is a real no-brainer. So hit them up. It's 866-242-2352. That's 866-242-2352, or you can simply text the word Roman, R-O-M-A-N, Roman, to 65532. Roman to 65532. Of course, all their details will be down in the description box below. And now, let's head on back to the studio. If you'd like to go deeper into the story, I'll throw all my research notes down into the description box below this video. You can click on any one of those links and it'll take you to the relevant articles. And of course, that's that description box right below those like and subscribe buttons, which I hope you already smashed. And now lastly, over the weekend, over on Epoch TV, I published a phenomenal exclusive episode detailing a topic that unfortunately I cannot discuss here on YouTube. It was a story of a 28-year-old professional basketball player who suddenly died of a heart attack. Now, even though I would love to talk about the details of that particular story here on YouTube, well, unfortunately, as you know, this platform is not really kind to certain types of content, even if that content is 100% factual. And so, if you'd like to check out that awesome exclusive episode, you can find it over on Epoch TV, our no censorship video platform. The link to that episode will be right there at the very, very top of the description box below. You can just click on that link and it'll take you over to Epoch TV where you can watch it right away. Again, that link is right there at the top of the description box below. I hope you check it out. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed. Most importantly, stay free.